What if the biggest royal shock is not Meghan Markle returning to Britain, but the possibility that Harry was preparing to return without her? Because suddenly, the picture being painted is not of a united couple happily planning a family homecoming. It is far more explosive. Harry alone, Meghan staying in America, Britain becoming his escape route while California remains hers. And if that was genuinely the plan, then the obvious question is terrifyingly simple. What changed inside that marriage, and what pressure forced the story to suddenly look completely different? For months, the public has been given the impression that any return to Britain would have to involve the entire family, yet now the reported sequence appears completely different. Harry was allegedly considering rebuilding a British base on his own. Meghan was supposedly staying thousands of miles away. Then, almost abruptly, Meghan appears to be part of the return. That is where the gossip becomes explosive, because when somebody changes direction this quickly, people naturally start asking what happened behind closed doors. Was this about marriage pressure, money, security, legal concerns, or was something much bigger developing that could no longer be ignored? And then comes the first major clue. Harry had reportedly been looking toward Britain for months, specifically around the Cotswolds, close to Highgrove, and an area deeply familiar to him. That detail matters because this was not simply sentimental talk about missing home. Looking at property suggests planning. It suggests logistics. It suggests someone asking where they could actually live, how they could establish a base, and what life might look like if America stopped being the permanent answer. Britain was no longer just a memory. It was allegedly becoming an option. And here is where the story becomes almost impossible to ignore. The reported plan was not necessarily Harry and Meghan arriving together. It was Harry alone. Think about the symbolism. They left royal life together. They built their California identity together. They presented themselves as an inseparable team. Yet now, according to the claims surrounding this story, the first escape route appears to have had only one passenger in mind. Harry. That single detail changes everything. Because Harry has repeatedly spoken about missing Britain, missing its people, its culture, and the life he once knew. His language has increasingly sounded less like somebody who has permanently settled into America and more like somebody keeping a door open. He may live in the United States, but even that wording leaves room for an exit. And when those comments are placed beside reports of property searches, the coincidence starts looking suspiciously convenient. Then Meghan suddenly enters the picture. Why? That is the question nobody can escape. If Harry was genuinely prepared to establish himself in Britain without her, what changed her position? Was she suddenly convinced Britain was wonderful again? Or did the possibility of Harry building an independent British life create a risk she simply could not tolerate? Because if Harry returned alone, the entire dynamic would change. He would have his own base. His children could potentially become connected to Britain again. His family relationships could begin rebuilding without Meghan controlling every part of the geographical equation. And suddenly, the idea of separation would no longer be theoretical. It would become practical. The California dream was supposed to demonstrate that Harry and Meghan could build something bigger, richer, and freer outside the monarchy. Massive entertainment deals, celebrity visibility, commercial partnerships, luxury living. The whole post-royal experiment was built around independence. But the shine has not been as consistent as originally imagined. Projects have stumbled, partnerships have changed, legal battles have continued, and maintaining an enormous California lifestyle while paying for security, staff, travel, and lawyers is not exactly cheap. And just when the public thinks the mystery is beginning to make sense, another piece falls into place. Harry's potential British base could also become strategically important if the marriage ever deteriorates. If the children remain firmly rooted in California, a future separation could become vastly more complicated. But if the family establishes a genuine life in Britain, the entire legal and practical landscape could shift. But the money pressure does not end there, because another detail makes the reported timing even more intriguing: taxes. Harry and Meghan have now spent years outside Britain, and the argument being circulated is that the timing of a return could carry financial advantages after such a long period abroad. That does not prove that money is driving the move, but it adds another layer to the mystery. When security expenses are enormous, commercial momentum is uncertain, legal costs continue, and a potentially favorable tax position appears at precisely the same moment as a reported return, suddenly nostalgia becomes only one piece of the puzzle. And then there is the property question. Why keep the enormous California home if Britain is genuinely becoming the new family base? Why maintain one expensive residence while establishing another? That makes little sense for people supposedly simplifying their lives. Unless, of course, they are not really choosing between Britain and America at all. Perhaps the plan is to keep both doors open. Britain when useful, California when useful, royal proximity anonymity without completely surrendering the celebrity lifestyle. It is the very same half-in, half-out formula that once caused such controversy, only now the dividing line is no longer simply royal duty. It is geography, money, family, and identity. And that is where the marriage question becomes impossible to ignore. If Harry establishes a genuine life in Britain, his position changes dramatically should the relationship later collapse. A British home, British connections, and children already familiar with life in Britain could provide him with a foundation he simply would not have if everything remained centered in California. Again, this is not proof that separation is imminent, but it explains why the original reported plan was so explosive. Harry alone returning would have created an entirely different balance of power. That is the moment that turns a curious story into a royal mystery. Because if Meghan truly wanted to remain in California, what persuaded her to reverse direction? Was it fear of being left behind? Was it concern about Harry establishing independence? Was it business pressure? Or was there something happening behind the scenes that made staying in America look less attractive by the day? And now bring the royal family back into the equation. Returning to Britain does not automatically mean returning to royal life. Harry can come home as a son, but that does not mean he returns as a working royal. That distinction is absolutely critical. A British address cannot magically restore a position that disappeared years ago. A postcode is not a royal appointment. And if Harry is expecting renewed status, security, or institutional relevance simply because he has moved closer to the monarchy, there could be a brutal disappointment waiting for him, because Charles may be willing to communicate privately with his son, while the institution itself remains far less forgiving. And then there is William. William represents the future of the monarchy, and there is no indication that the wounds of the past simply disappear because Harry suddenly misses Britain. The interviews happened, the accusations happened, the departures happened, the fallout happened. None of it evaporates because the California chapter has become uncomfortable. That is why this reported move could become the ultimate test of the entire post-royal experiment. If Harry returns, he risks admitting that the clean break did not deliver everything promised. If Meghan returns while maintaining one foot in California, the old half-in, half-out controversy could explode all over again. And if the marriage is already under pressure, Britain could become the stage where private problems become impossible to conceal. The most explosive allegation in this entire story remains unproven, that renewed scrutiny surrounding Harry's American immigration paperwork helped accelerate everything. If that allegation collapses, then the timing may simply be coincidence. But if there was genuinely a serious concern developing, suddenly the speed of the reported return makes far more sense. And Meghan now faces a problem either way. If the marriage is perfectly secure, why was Harry allegedly preparing to return without her? If everything in California is going brilliantly, why is Britain suddenly back on the table? If the family is financially comfortable, why maintain such an expensive dual country existence? The public is being offered the image of a family simply wanting to be closer to home. But underneath that image sits a much more complicated possibility. Harry may have reached the point where Britain once again offers something America cannot: familiarity, family, security possibilities, financial advantages, and perhaps most importantly, an escape route. Whether Meghan truly chose Britain or felt she had to choose Britain may be the detail that eventually reveals what is really happening behind the palace walls and inside the Sussex marriage. Because if Harry was once determined to leave Britain forever and is now allegedly preparing to return, the question is no longer whether he misses home. The question is what happened that made home necessary again.